I was asked to write a book, and the book is about what it takes to be the best. What are the principles involved with being the best, regardless of the occupation or regardless of the discipline that you choose? So I started thinking back, and I thought of this chapter, and the word that I invented, I think I invented it, is called recompete. I don't even know if that's a word, but I took the word compete, which I see as a missing factor in our society these days, and I put re on the front of it because we used to know how to compete. Recompete. That's a chapter in the upcoming book. Here's what I want you to think about. And let me just give you some clarity on what I mean by that through a story. My son Axel, he's 11 now, but when I think he was 8 or 9, we began this travel team together, and it was like 5 or 6 sets of parents and 5 or 6 kids. That was it, all we had. We had a great coach, and we put this little team together. And it was a ragtag team, and we were just beginning to work with this coach. And so we weren't particularly great at the beginning, right? So we used to get our butts kicked every weekend. We'd join these tournaments, and we'd get beat by 20 and 30 and sometimes 40 points. We would take a beating, right? And we got better. Like those 40-point margins now got to 30 points after 6 months. And then another 6 months would pass, and we'd only get beat by 20 points. And then another 8 months would pass, and we would only get beat by 10. And then another few months would pass of us working as a team and as a unit. And that same team that would lose by 30 or 40 was now in the hunt, was now competitive and losing a 1 or 2 point game until the day that we beat the teams, the exact teams that were beating us by 30 and 40 points. The moment that happened, I noticed something happening, and I noticed it in our culture. We beat a team that is used to beating us by 30 points. After we beat them, I noticed that their parents and the best player on the opposing team that we just beat would walk over to our coach and to our team and say, "Hey, we want to be on your team." And I was like, oh, okay, that's probably a good thing, right? Because the best player on their team, who used to beat us by 30, because we beat them, now wants to join our team. So they joined our team. Then we'd play the next tournament, and the next team that used to beat us by 30, we now beat. Now their best player and their parents come over to us and say, "We'd like to join your team now that you've beaten us." And that kept happening 3, 4, 5 times until now, 3 years later, we're that team that beats everybody by 30, 40 points. And you know what I miss most about that team? Was the struggle, was taking it on the chin and seeing what our boys were made of. I miss those days. I think in this day and age, the parents don't want their kids to take those kind of lumps. They want to rescue them from those lumps and give them some kind of entitlement as if they should win every game by 30. Well, I don't necessarily like winning games by 30. Because you never get to measure yourself in a game where you're up 30 points. I like games where you're getting your butt kicked. I want to see what I'm made of then, okay? That's where I think greatness lives. And that's a whole missing section of our world these days. That's why I say, let's learn to recompete. And I'm not just talking about youth sports, right? This happens in youth sports all the time. But follow it all the way up into the NBA. Follow it all the way up into there where these players are supposedly the greatest competitors in the world, yet even they are reluctant to measure themselves. They don't want to compete either. They want to build a super team so that they can actually ask less of themselves and depend on their teammates because they've built a super team and actually win games by 20, 30 points a game, and that's really no fun. But they seem to enjoy it. They seem to laugh on the bench and giggle and that's a whole section of town that I just don't believe in. And the only reason I don't believe in it is because it's not how we're built. competition is the first rule. The first rule of nature is competition. The first rule of biology is competition. You and I couldn't be here if our relatives, if our ancestors could not compete for mates, for shelter, for food, right? So now we seem to be competing for weird things like entitlement, like complaints, instead of competing to measure ourselves up against another person or a game, or compete against ourselves and measure ourselves and see how great we can possibly be. So that's what I want to know from you. Where have you stopped competing? If our greatest competitors on this planet won't compete, I want to know where you won't compete, because I want to re-enter the fray of competition. I want you to. I want to, and I want you to. Because if the world is going to a place that doesn't want to compete, you know, and everyone wins and everyone's a champion, or championships don't even count or matter because you got a fake team that's not really a team, it's just a group of all-stars, I want to know what we're made of. That's the only reason to compete in the first place. Where will you re-enter the fray? Where have you stopped competing, and where can you re-compete? Think about that. Let me know what it is. I want to talk more about this, and I think it's going to be a big subject matter in our culture going forward. So let's be the first to take it on. Let's be on the front of this wave of re-competition. Here's what I want you to do next. I want you to go over to boeason.com and I want you to download my free storytelling guide. And in there are all kinds of exercises to get you up on your feet, start developing and telling your story. You're also going to be the first to find out when a new video comes out, because the hardest thing about being the best and continuing to be the best is you have to be reminded of what is current. So you're going to be the first to know. We're going to keep you accountable. Go over to boeason.com. Continue to be the best.